And welcome once again to Living in the 21st Century. Joining me today again is Doreen Wade. She is the president for Salem United Organization. That's right here in Salem, Massachusetts. And also is Monique McNeil, vice president for the Socio-Economic Development Foundation of Boston. Ladies, want to welcome you back again to the show.
Thank you.
So Doreen, we were in continuation from where we left off, pertaining to you're looking at establishing a theater to show things in a more manifested and realistic visual form as a way of educating this generation as to where we came from and what we're doing in the present.
Yes. As I said, we're trying to get a building, and in that building, we are going to be educating. We're going to be holding exhibits. We're going to be doing workshops on voter education, voter registration, U.S. Census, and also civil service. And then we're going to have other programs within that building, because I feel that direct hands-on interaction has been very successful over the summer while I've been putting on this exhibit. Yes, due to COVID, we did some limitations and other things, but still that immediate interaction helped people understand when they looked at things, when they actually saw a shackle, a slave shackle sitting there, when they actually saw images of their history, it actually opened up people's eyes and it made them think. And that's what I want to do. I want to make people think. We're also going to be taking and making Black history facts. And we're going to be putting these Black history facts to music and to other things that draw young people's attention, that makes them see things. So we're going to be able to put them on iPhones and iPads and whatever else young people look at. So we're bringing history to their technology, which will be another form of making sure they're educated.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. One, I want to turn our attentions now to voters' suppression in this country. We see since last election, that the Republicans knew they got beat. They also recognize that it don't seem that they may ever be able to win a fair election. So they put in crafty laws and instructions in almost every state to break down the strength of Black people or minorities from voting. It's like reintroducing the Jim Crow era. It's like also stating you're equal but segregated. I can go back into history and see how it gone strictly against the 1964 Bills of Rights Act. And when you are living in a system where one party think that you can do wrong and accept it and embrace that as right, you can actually say we have a dictatorial society existing in a democracy. And when you have almost close to half the nation going along with that kind of behavior, it tells you that the nation itself is on the verge of implosion. Yes. And that stigma doesn't reflect well to the international world out there who look up to America as a nation with great democracy values. And it doesn't send or paint a great picture in the eyes who have once viewed America as the number one leading country in the world. And it has nothing to do with the military, how much superpower you have, or how good is your economy, or anything like that. There are other nations out there who are doing well with the economy too. But the standards that this nation once set was standards and values that other nations embrace. Now, it don't seem that these nations really look up to America anymore because what the past 4 or 5 years has brought us. So my question goes out to you, Doreen. How are we as a nation and a democratic society prepared to function effectively if half the nation is on the verge of implosion? And we saw a little bit of it in the insurrection, and that is just the smoke. If this behavior continue to exist, we're going to see a whole lot worse coming in the next election than we just experienced a couple months ago. What's your view on this?
Well, ironically, part of my exhibit is about Black suppression. So when they walk through to hear the history, I like to inform people that they're only stepping on their own selves. One thing that I believe that is happening is when we're watching the news and we're watching the media and they're talking, and I'm not blaming the media, but basically everybody is talking about Black suppression of the vote.
Yes.
Well, if we basically break down what these Republican politicians are doing, what I am trying to teach people is we're promoting that it's Black suppression, when reality, that Black suppression is going to hurt those 45 million voters that think that if they assist in aiding these Republican officials in suppressing the vote, that they're not going to be affected. And that is what I call white privilege mentality. You think that all these rules and regulations that are being put into office, into law, are not going to affect white people. Let me go as simple as Georgia. You're not supposed to have water. You can't give anybody water. You can't put chairs down. Well, what about a 70-year-old white person who might be a Republican, who's going to stand in that line? They're not going to be able to have water. They're not going to be able to sit down. They're hurting themselves. You can teach this lesson, but the only problem is going to come when it actually slaps reality in the face and they realize that they voted for rules and laws that are going to hurt them.
But I want to ask a question right there. And you just mentioned, let's say there's a white Republican who wants a glass of water, but because the rules say you can't give someone water. Now, something tells me in my brain, and I've seen this happen over and over again, the Republicans, it doesn't matter what they do, they always embrace it and stick with each other. For the Democratic Society, they don't. And this is a problem. A white person may offer the next white person as a Republican a bottle of water. No Democrat is going to go across and say, hey, what you doing? That's breaking the law. And they get away with it. If a Democrat do it, a Republican can ball and call fire down from heaven. No, this is a problem. You should be cited. You should be locked up. This is the problem, and I'll explain to you why. We see clearly, and this is not I'm choosing sides in this case, or saying what Governor Cuomo had done is correct. We saw President Donald Trump, out of his own mouth, on the campaign trail, getting out of a bus, what he did to females, how he do it, they let him do it, and there were times mentioned where he were engaged in prostitution. It's all factual information. It was well documented and presented before the public. No one cares, no one do anything about it. They all played it down. Now, I'm not saying what Governor Cuomo did, if he done it, is right or wrong. But the first thing the Democrats do, resign. This is wrong. Resign. Now, the Democrats always ready to jump on the bandwagon to throw the hammer down someone's head, whether they get the facts straight or not. And when the facts are actually in front of the Republicans' eyes, they embrace it and pretend it never exists. Do you see a problem in the Democrats where they're trying to be too picture perfect and bring about problems?
Most definitely. Most definitely. I can speak from experience today that there's a lot of Democrats in Massachusetts who will not touch what I am doing, who will not be involved in what I am doing. And what I am doing is actually nothing. But they stay very far from because they don't want to look bad. Not right now. We have to get things back to the way they were. It's a very bad problem. And that comes from the education over these years. It could go back to my grandparents. And we vote per party. We do not vote per person. So what needs to be done is an education, even in the Democratic Party, that we need to vote for Democrats who are going to stand up for things, just like the woman, God forgive me, I forgot her name, but she stood on the steps of DC and fighting every single day until a protection was done by our president that evictions would not take place. We would hold off for a while. That's what we need. We didn't put her in office because she's a Democrat. She was put in office by her constituents because she worked for the people. She knew what it was like to be poor, to be homeless. That's what we need to do. And that's the education that I think needs to go across this country and we need to learn. Just because you are a Democrat does not mean you are protecting my interests, whether you are Black or whether you are white.
Absolutely. And Monique, what you have to say about that? I mean that when we go about electing our representatives, it should be done in a manner where the person shouldn't be viewed for what career path they would have traveled, but rather the integrity of that person's character. What do you think? What's your input on that?
I would have to definitely agree with what Doreen said. It's so important that we choose leaders who will be a representative of the people and have our views be in alignment of what our needs are, and have the guts and the tenacity to fight for what we are looking for, what we as a people need, not the status quo or not what you think we need, but to actually stand in the trenches and get a whiff of the air and get an understanding of where we're coming from, what our actual needs are, where we want to go, and willing to fight for those for us. And I think that's what we need. We need to get back to that. We need to get back to the grassroots, not just picking somebody because they got a name or affiliation. But what have you done? What are you willing to do? Are you willing to sacrifice and go beyond the bare minimum to make things happen? It's about making things happen and getting the job done. And that's what we need to go back to. Absolutely.
Great. And Doreen, one thing too I want to look at is the assault and incarceration by the system towards Black and minorities in this country. It's like cutting off the seed so it can't grow from its infancy stage. Years ago, I had a psychologist on my show from LaSalle's College. And one of the things he stated is that while kids are in school, they are monitored, and the percentage of those who are doing pretty well is already gauged. That percentage, the system has already lined up for imprisonment, for incarceration in the future. So they have a forecast of how their economic growth is going to look in the prison system. And that's why a lot of them probably are privatized. It's all about making money. And we have thousands and thousands of Black men in prison today doing years upon top of years for what? A little spliff of marijuana, the same marijuana that is now legalized in many states here in the United States, and the government is making profits off of them. And this only happens simply because now the rich and wealthy got access to do these things. Well, if I measure marijuana and measure tobacco, which was the worst? So I'm not here condoning neither one of the two, but we see the wrongful incarcerations that went out to black people in this country that's doing years upon years around sentencing and distraction. And this is a problem because if we can have them in prison, they can't impregnate anyone. So that's a cut off of impregnating more black women. If we have them in the system, they can't vote. So we see where the voter suppression has come into play a important part, not just at the voters' booth or at the voters' line, but it's already in place for many years. How do we as a black people, and we got black folks now in positions that can remedy that, but how best can we as a black people can try to preserve the integrity of our young black men and women in this country, give them more vision that they can hold on to rather than just selling drugs and gun violence and guying each other down, and then the police forces capitalize on that and destroy them even a little bit more. What kind of advice or information you would like to impart today when it comes to that?
Well, I can speak on the things that I do. And I'll start with my exhibit because I always have to go back to my exhibit because every question you ask ends up being in my exhibit.
Great.
A part of my exhibit is labeled From the Shackle to the Handcuffs. I actually have handcuffs on display. First off, I like to educate through that. What's going to happen to you? Secondly of all, I like to elate it to today. During my tour, I tell people, 4 weeks ago, I was watching a show called Sunday Morning. And in that show, it talked about exactly what I talk about, losing your rights to vote. That is your legacy that you're passing on to your family. 1% of black men that come out of prison get their rights back versus 42% of whites who come out of prison get their rights back. So right there, that is an inequity that we need to begin to work on. Secondly of all, I personally work directly with the police chief in Salem, in Cambridge, and in other places. And first thing is, I like to understand, what are you going to do? How are you going to do it? I mean, a simple example of the way they start to begin to take your rights. I have an event every year. During that event, they put horses up so that people can't park all along the way, so that limits how many people can come to my exhibit. I sat down and talked to the police chief. He's new. I'm not going to accept that anymore. Maybe I took it from the past, but I'm not taking it anymore. These inequities have to stop. Now, that's something as simple as suppression of allowing you to come to an event. So if you can imagine, if it's done with that, imagine what is being done in the undercut and the underbellies that we cannot see. So I make it a point to really sit down and discuss things and work with these leaders. And I don't care if they look like me or they don't. There are questions that I ask them, and I do this along all avenues of what I am doing or what I am involved in. And if I'm not involved in it, people come to me as an advocate and say, I need your help. and I open up any door that I can through whatever connections I have. That's what we need as a people to start doing. We need to work together. It doesn't matter what side of the tracks we come from. That is gone. That history is no longer gone.
Yes.
Poor, rich, middle class. That doesn't stand anymore. As Black people, as brown people, as yellow people, whatever we call ourselves, we need to start working together. Things are not going to change. They are going to stay the same if we can't unite.
That's true. And when I think about lynching, and I think Monique and I, we had this discussion on the other program. We see lynching gone from the hanging from a tree with a rope around your neck to actually become a little bit more decent. It looked ugly doing that from a tree, so we take our guns and we gun you down. But it's more than just lynching, even at the nozzle of a gun. We are getting lynched out the legacy of what our ancestors have been through for us. We're getting lynched economically. We're getting lynched socially. We're getting lynched from a legislative standpoint. We're getting lynched however you look at it. We are getting lynched in a way that suppression spells it all. And this is where the vision and education has to come in and play an important part in the development of minorities in this country. I think it's not so much the everyday Black man and Black woman or white man and white woman. I've seen it in my own eyes. I mean, I'm from a biracial family, but I've seen where Blacks and whites are learning to get along. Yes, there may be a little bit of color cautiousness. They're getting along in the workplace. They're getting along in many areas. They're interracially getting married. They're having interracial kids. They're going on dates. They're learning to coincide with each other at colleges and schools. They're getting along. But the problem is not the individuals that way anymore, even though there may be still levels of discrimination. The problem lies within a structured system. Comes from the Senate, the Congress, right down to the police forces. Those are the ones who keeping this thing revitalized, and they're crafting the ways to make sure that you're Black, you stay Black. Even if you are a successful Black person in this country, we still see that the cops don't care who you are. Prove it. You prove who you are. Let me see some ID. Let me see some proof. And the white guy can walk however he wants, and there's no problem. I was told recently of a situation where there was a Black guy and a white guy, two buddies, doing the same thing. The cops slapped the handcuffs on the Black person, arrested him, and leave the white guy alone. And that was a setup that the cop didn't even know about. So it goes to show you how the system really structured against us. It's like the police who were caught on the tape pulling over a white lady. And she said, "My hands are up." This is a white lady, "My hands are up. I don't want you to kill me now. I don't want you to shoot me." He said, No. We don't shoot white people. It's only the black ones we shoot. And he got fired for that. So there are a lot of them with that mentality. And yes, I'm not saying that all policemen or law enforcement are the same. I believe that there are a lot of good cops in this country, all over the country. But I believe in every department, there are some criminal cops that hiding under the uniform and conducting their bad behavior, and hope that when they do this stupidness that they are held up by their partners. Well, I think it's time that the police chiefs and captains and leaders of the forces, when you have this kind of deviation going on in your department, if it happens once, twice, 3 times, you resign, you let go of that person. The police forces are there to serve and to protect, not to kill and destroy. They are not judges, jury, and execution. It don't work that way. We pay them to serve us, but they're putting their own self-ego and forgetting all along now that each of them have a camera on them, and they're recording everything that get done, because they're so inculcated with their negative way of doing things, is that they can't break away from it. So we are down on our last three minutes. So Doreen, I would like you to give the final wrap-up, and Monique, you just passion a word or two quickly before we go.
Go ahead, Monique.
I just want to say thank you for having us on.
Sure.
To speak about Black history and getting that information out there. And we're going to do magnificent things. I'm excited for what this year will bring, and to stay tuned, to stay involved, and get yourselves educated. And let's go for another year.
Great. And you, Doreen?
And I would just like to end by saying that Monique and I are wearing T-shirts that say Black Picnic Day, but we are bringing its origin back. And we are calling it Negro Election Black Celebration. Negro Election is the history, and Black Celebration is the modern. We're bringing the past to the present. And in doing that, we are also educating people that, ending with lynching. Picnic is all about lynching. It was once called Negro barbecue. It's when white people got together, picked a Black person, and they lynched them, but not only lynched them, they burned them. So that's what we are bringing to this history when we are teaching it to you.
Well,
so I want to thank you for the opportunity to allow me to be able to do that.
Well, thank you. You have not only taught or teach in these few moments a good, interested lesson to the people here in Attleboro and which was shown Newton, but also the Caribbean region, because the show broadcasts in the Caribbean region. And many of those today also listen and learn a lot of American history in schools. So I want to thank you for that. And I hope at some time in the near future, we can all get together again and have a next enlightening conversation like this. Well, until then, I want to say thank you all for joining in on Living in the 21st Century. Have a nice day.